Oh, do you guys remember this morning? Oh, I remember it so well. Probably one of my favorite mornings I have ever had here, Wave. Out in the weather garden where we ended up with more than 11 inches of snow. I've talked about this several times, but that's what I remember. It was stuck. If you look carefully, it's stuck in my eyelashes. It was accumulating in my eyelashes. It was snowing so hard. What a pretty setup that was. All right, welcome to the winter forecast. Hello, everyone. I'm Wave Meteorologist Brian Good. It's the day you guys have been waiting for. Of course, you got a little teaser last night. Type 3, if you guys saw that and saw the at least general outlook for the winter that we're going to discuss. And I didn't accompany a video with it. Normally, I try to be live when that happens, but this year's a little odd. So this year, I wanted to make sure to not only give you what you want, which is always right out of the gate, how much snow. But I got to give context to that. I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer. It's going to give you context to it all, as well as other aspects of the winter season we need to cover. And that's what today is all about. All right. So 3, if you saw that, thanks, Weather Geek. You guys can comment too on the social media side if you're watching on streaming, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch are your options. Or if you just want to be a lurker and just hang out and watch stream on the Fire Stick or on the phone, that is perfectly fine. A lot of you just now joining in, so I had a feeling it sometimes takes a while for these notifications to get out, so I try to give you guys just a moment before I get too far into discussion, and everyone has to make me backtrack, like, what did he say? How much snow did he say? So anyway, we're going to cover a lot, but I need you all to help me out. I need you all to be a partner with me here on this. There's a lot of aspects I'm going to announce with this. I'm going to try to be as clear as my brain can handle for the lack of sleep right now. So bear with me on that. Be patient with me. And I know you're going to ask a lot of questions that I likely will answer for you as the blog evolves. So try to hold off if you can until we get toward the very end. And if I haven't answered that point, I will do my best toward the end of the blog itself. Or as always, you guys are really good about helping each other out. And a lot of you are able to do just that. And if you're able to answer someone else's question, I trust most of y'all. So I think you guys can help each other out. Hello to Gary is here. Hello to Amy. Hello to Jeremy. Important to note, I have to make this disclaimer every year. If you're new to the BOTS phrase, and like, what does BOTS mean? Someone always says that every year. BOTS is an acronym for Breen on the Snow. It is our chant that we started here at Wave. Actually, Troy Carter, rest her soul, she's the one that we chatted a lot. She was a big snow lover, and we chatted one day, and we were trying to think of different acronyms to talk about snow, and BOTS came to life. And that was 14 and a half years ago, something like that we came up with that. And so BOTS it's Wave Country's slogan for snow around here. So if you see that hashtag, which I mentioned before, that hashtag is gone everywhere, I think worldwide now, but that's what it stands for. And that will always be our chant for Breen on the Snow. And for some that hate snow, they change it to Breen on the Spring. But that's not fair. That's cheating. All right. Hello to Adam. Good to see you there. As always, I had a feeling you were going to be here today. And Carrie, you were first. I saw on the YouTuber side. I knew you were going to be first. Waiting for it. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to try. There is no easy way to do this in order without being too confusing. So what I'm going to do is start just with the basics of what we're going to be facing at times this winter season, just so everyone understands the different types, because I think that's important to note before I get into the weeds of what we're expecting. And what I mean by that is our lovely friends, the precipitation types. Oh boy, don't you love this? Remember in school, pull up a chair, number 2 pencil, get your Scantrons out. No looking on anyone else's desk. This is the easiest way, and I love this graphic because this is what really spells out the Ohio Valley and Wave Country in general, is the mess that we always get. And we joke a lot that it always seems like the rain snow line or the rain ice line is always the Ohio River or I-64. Happens many, many times. I'm sure you guys down the parkways feel it's you down there, but we all have our feeling about where that line is, but it usually winds up being within Wave Country. So it's important to note, what are we talking about and what are we looking for when we face some of these events in the coming weeks and months down the road here. We'll start with the easiest, and that is, of course, rain. And we're looking at everything sideways here, as we do with the soundings a lot. So you're looking at the atmosphere on a side profile. 32 degrees is, of course, the number for freezing, right? Well, you don't have to worry about that with rain if that freezing line is way up high. So everything you get from below the cloud level is going to be in liquid form. Easy peasy. That's the easiest one other than snow to forecast. It's obviously the most common that we face. But then we get into the weeds here a little more when it comes to freezing rain. And freezing rain gets confused a lot with sleet. People will see sleet and say, hey, I have freezing rain hitting my windshield. Same in the summertime when we have hail, and some people say I have sleet. So I know that there is confusion out there, or I wouldn't be bringing this up. And I understand it. It can be a little complex, but I want to make sure we just address this out of the gate now. Freezing rain, the easiest way to explain it, it's rain, flat out rain until it touches something. Once it touches something, it will freeze on that object and become a glaze of ice. And therefore, we get the freeze and rain idea. The complexity of freeze and rain, and this is where it's the most challenging in our area especially, is that snowflakes will indeed fall out of the cloud, but they melt. And the warm layer, the red area, is just thick enough to make it back into a raindrop again. However, at the ground level, where we're standing at, where our fences are, where the mailbox is, where our cars are parked, that layer is still below 32. So when the rain hits it, it freezes again, but it doesn't have time to change back into another form. As far as a solid, it stays a liquid and doesn't freeze until it touches the actual object itself. Freezing rain is the most dangerous type of wintry weather that we have in our area. It is the most difficult to forecast because that red zone you see there, that red layer, boy, that can vary. And it's very tough for models, even with today's technology, it's really tough for them to gauge how thick that layer is. If it's not at that level, you get a whole different type that falls out of the cloud. But freezing rain is what we've dealt with ice storms, obviously. That's why you always get that glazed look on the trees. And it weighs down objects when it comes to tree branches and power lines. But freezing rain is a big one around here that we see often. Our second, probably most common, is sleet. And this, again, is where it gets confused with hail. And it's not hail. Hail is a process that involves the warm aspects of the atmosphere. It's what we call a convective process. This is a cold type of precipitation. It's similar in the idea of freeze and rain, where it starts as a snowflake, so they have that in common, but the red layer or the warm layer above 32, it's not as deep. So yes, it can start to melt, but it still has enough time to refreeze again before it touches any object on the ground. So it changes the shape into a little ice ball, which we call sleet, which bounces around. They're all the same size. So that's easy. Hail is different sizes. So they can be pea size to gigantic, all right? Or gorilla hail, you hear a lot from Reed Timmer, right? Sleet's all the same size. Little bitty pellets that fall and they ding on your windshield. This is our second most common that we get into wave country. You think it's snow, it's not. It's sleet and freeze and rain are the two most common types we face in our area. But that warm layer, that red zone, is the thorn in our side as meteorologists in the Ohio Valley, anywhere, but certainly in the Ohio Valley, every single winter, because we have to figure out how much of that layer exists. Is it going to be shallow, or is it going to be a little bit more of a thicker layer that completely changes the outcome? Yes, sleet is still slick, but it's a little more of a traction getter on the road with your tires than obviously ice. You can have all the best tires in the world and try to drive on ice, and good luck. But with sleets, it's slick, but you can gain a little bit. You can gain a little bit. Obviously, this is everyone's... Oh, just kidding. That wake you up? Somebody was half asleep right now listening to me like, this guy is so boring. Boom. Anyway, snow is the easiest, as well as the rain part, because it involves the one temperature type all up and down the atmosphere. In this case, it's all below freezing from the cloud all the way to our pinky toes. And therefore, it's all snow. That's what you want to see. That's the type that everyone loves the most. Has everyone understood all that? I hope so. Good. All right. All right. I just wanted to make sure to clarify all these different types, because I think it's important to know what we're referring to when we talk about this in the forecast. And sometimes we can switch around. It can start as rain, then go to freeze and rain, then eventually it can go to snow, especially on the backlash snowfall, or the other way around. You can start off with snow and you warm to freeze and rain. So it's never easy. And it's the reason why a lot of us are gray-headed in this business, is this type of setup. Okay, let's move on. So everyone knows that, I think by now anyway, the talk of La Niña has been around. And if you're wondering what is La Niña, it means the baby in Spanish, and that counterpart is El Niño, and La Niña being the opposite effect, or the feminine version of it. La Niña is really all about the Eastern Pacific. It has nothing to do with what's going on off the coast of Washington State or off the coast of Jersey, or what's happening around Hawaii. It's all about one particular section of the Eastern Pacific. This is where it matters, and we've highlighted it for you. It matters because this is the most influential spot of the Pacific Ocean when it comes to changing the weather pattern, not only for the United States, but for the entire Northern Hemisphere. Can be altered just by changing the temperature of the ocean in this area. When it's warmer than average, we call that El Nino, obviously colder being La Nina. Last year was a La Nina, roughly. It was close. It was La Nina-ish. I don't want to get into the technicalities on what defines it by the numbers that we go by, but it was there. It was bouncing along. It was a very, very weak La Nina. Enough to still be influential in our weather for sure, but I wouldn't classify it by strong by any account. This year's La Nina is forecast to be another weak La Nina. I don't really see it right now. It's on to a strong start, and it is on a faster pace as far as matching the level of last year, if not exceeding it just a bit compared to where we were at as we entered November last year. So La Nina is on the way. We just don't know how strong of one yet. Right now, I'm thinking it's going to be a relatively weak La Nina. And what does that mean for us when it comes to our patterns when we see a La Nina pattern like that into the Eastern Pacific? Well, let me show you. Once we get into the pattern of the North American area, the continent, into United States, we end up with the buckling of the jet, with a high that breaks out across areas of the Gulf of Alaska. That causes the jet to do a bit of a split but it also allows for much more of the northwest part of the country to be absolutely slammed with one storm system after another. Ski resorts love La Nina when it comes to the Northern Rockies. They're already off to a great start. I don't know if you've been watching the video of Montana. They're running ahead of schedule on snow there. El Nino is what a lot of ski resorts in the Sierra Nevadas all the way down into the Arizona area, New Mexico, they get the love then. Not so much in a La Nina pattern. Anytime you hear about Los Angeles dealing with massive floods and you'll hear the term Pineapple Express and the atmospheric river and all that terminology, that's typically a El Nino pattern, which usually just rakes across Southern California and just pours in warm air all over the lower 48, including here into wave country. And we tend to have very warm winters. But with La Nina, we don't have that flow most of the time. That allows the jet to then have more arc to it. So these colder shots of air that come in from Canada, typically around the Hudson Bay area, have a much better chance to drop south of the Great Lakes into our region. At the same time, because of where the Gulf is located, storm systems love to sense that. As I mentioned before about taking, if you're watching the blog the other day, I made the analogy of like the match being held up to the lighter fluid when it came to our little clipper that's moving in here today, where it's lighting up because it's detecting the moisture that's coming in off the Gulf here. It becomes on fire basically and becomes active. Storm systems do the same thing in this setup. You take Arctic air and you dive it south and you get a little closer to that warmer Gulf. Ooh, storm systems love that, and they can become strong. The problem with that in terms of forecasting, it's all very last minute. It's all at the very last moment these systems form. So the models will show them for 10 days out, and then we have to go through the model drama and social media drama, and everyone gets all upset. But we don't really know exactly what will happen, the true reality, until we get to this phase of it, until they actually get near the Gulf. I wish it was easier than that, but it's what we're dealt with. All right, we can't change it, can't control it. So you can either worry about complaining about it all the time, or just accept that's just the fact of the way it works. But if you're a snow lover, this is a good pattern. And if you looked at the snow map, and I didn't put it in here, but the snowfall compared to normal last year, it nearly matched this, especially for the Ohio Valley, including wave country. We were well above normal on snowfall, and that was about the only spot. The rest of the country had a snow drought. You'd think that in the Midwest we get a lot of snow in this pattern. Not always. The problem they run into is they can get a lot of dry Arctic air masses, a lot of really cold air, but if there's no moisture that they can pull from, you don't have the Pineapple Express feeding them, right? You've got that cut off. So these systems drop in, they come through mainly with wind energy, but they don't get their moisture until they round the base of these troughs. So sometimes the upper Midwest into Minnesota, Wisconsin, they can get the snow shaft. They don't get as much as they were hoping for, and they get a little upset. And we end up being the bigger winners. We saw that last year. Will that repeat again this year? Well, we know at least right now we're on track for a La Nina pattern, so it's fair to say yes, that this will likely be a very similar storyline where they may end up with a below normal on snowfall, but we will likely be above it if it all holds, and that's the way it's looking right now. So a closer view of that, again, you see right in the Ohio Valley, and it's not always all snow, so let me be clear on that. I'm just assuming that there will be times when the cold air matches up exactly when these storm systems are tracking through, right? That's perfect. It's a bot's lover dream there. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes they're a little off on placement, and you can still get a lot of moisture, but it's not cold enough for snow, so then you end up with rain. And you can get sometimes thunderstorms. Although thunderstorms are a little more common in the late winter season, and La Nina actually bookended. Early and late, you end up with thunderstorms and then cold and snowy in the middle. That's what I've noticed about La Nina winters here. In general, El Nino, we tend to have severe weather season that can linger all the way into January and February. It can just be active much of the time. And we've seen that before, but I don't see that happening for this year. Another aspect that we're going to be tracking is going to be the polar vortex, which has been around forever. But in 2013, 2014, one of those years, it became a meme. I think Amy Poehler's face was used for it from SNL for polar vortex. Anyway, it became a meme, and everyone thought it was a new thing we're coming up with to be catchy and trendy for meteorologists. No, it's always been around. Just no one ever talks about it. It fades away in the summer season, and it comes back in the winter, and it is doing that now. It's coming back. The current forecast, this is taking us through, and you're looking, by the way, I always call it Earth's bald spot. You're looking straight down on Earth. So we're over here down in this area, all right? So this is the North Pole. Santa's up here, up in that area. Okay. At the moment, through at least the 11th of November, the core of the polar vortex, which is a little split looking there, is right over Siberia. That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. You really want to build up the snow in Siberia fast. And you want to build it up fast in October. It is part of an indicator called the SAI, not to get into a lot of acronyms, but when you build up a snowpack rapidly across Siberia, it is one of the bigger factors that leads to an early winter for the United States. And we have seen just in the past couple of days, and of course the data ended now that we're November, but here's the problem, and I'm not trying to get into a political discussion, but some of the data that we needed for the month of October, we did not gain access to because of the government shutdown. So I got some of it from third parties I was able to find, but the more reliable sites were not being updated. So that was a little frustrating this year. I think we could still make this work. We're still gonna make this work. But from what I was able to pull from it, the snowpack across Siberia was advancing enough that I think it was a pretty good indicator that not so much November, but I think December could be a month to watch, as you'll see here in just a second. The polar vortex is key. It is the drive. It's the coldest spot in the northern hemisphere. Sometimes it can be the coldest spot on Earth, but certainly the coldest spot in the northern hemisphere in the winter season. The polar vortex likes to be where you would think it would be, in the North Pole area, in the Arctic. With the ice that has been melting over the recent decades, and there's no doubt been a significant drop in the amount of Arctic ice. It's a little scary. It really is. I have a map that we keep track of the outline of where it is each year, and just we have less and less to work with every winter. And it's not just a little small amount, it's a dramatic amount. And it's like, I mean, these images, I know you've seen of the polar bears, floating around little chunks of ice. It is pretty sad. I mean, this is a problem. And it's changing certainly the way winter goes, because when you start to have a warmer Arctic, you cause the polar vortex to do a couple of things. One, be completely displaced from its home base. And two, you can get a lot of what we call stretched or even split appearances to the polar vortex, which we've seen the past couple of years. The stretched polar vortex has been a more common thing. But it doesn't want to stay there. It wobbles around. You would think it would stay in that area, but with the warmer waters and not as much ice, it tends to be in different places. Sometimes it can be over here in Siberia. Sometimes it can be into northern areas of Canada. Sometimes it can be into Europe. It can be in both places at once by doing, again, either a stretch look where it elongates across the United States, or it can be split and looks like two different hemispheres, basically, a little blob there and a little blob there. Those have significant impacts on how winter plays out. Here's the challenge, though, and why it's tough to include it in a winter forecast of any sort, is that we can only see 2 weeks out on a polar vortex. We can't see beyond that. So because of that, we have our challenges ahead of us, and that's why we are always trying to sniff it out. And that's the whole purpose of Snow Talk being the blog the way it is that we're always looking here on the blog for any sign of that, any change in behavior. And sometimes, even if it's a warmer signal, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to bend it to, as a snow lover, I'm still not going to bend it to make it because I'm a snow lover. People think I do that. I don't do that, I promise. And I don't get paid by Kroger either to talk about snow. Anyway, we get a lot of stretch polar vortex events. I've noticed since the lack of ice has been an issue. So I have a feeling that's likely what we'll face. I don't see that yet. Obviously, I can only see 2 weeks out, and 2 weeks out, it's not even a factor. We have some cold air to work with here. But this is nothing. This is not a sign of a polar or an Arctic attack coming anytime soon. In fact, quite the opposite will be happening here in the next 1 to 2 weeks. But I'll be watching the signal, and I'll be showing it to you on the blog on a daily fashion once we get into our daily routine of Snow Talk. And once we see signs of it shifting around or trying to do some type of stretched event, then it's game on. Then the fun really begins. But I'm just adding it into the forecast for this particular discussion, just so you know it's one of the tools you'll see often. And I wanted to explain, because sometimes I won't be able to talk about it in this much detail in a typical day. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give the overall idea of how we're looking on temperature. And this, again, doesn't mean people think, oh, the red means hot, blue means cold. Not necessarily. This is compared to average. Our average in Louisville, our coldest average high is about 39. This is looking at the entire winter season. I cannot, and no meteorologist can, we can't tell you when we're going to get certain cold attacks at certain times of the year, just like I'm about to show you a snow map. And that's really more for entertainment, to be honest with you, only because nobody can really forecast snow more than really the 2-week window out. However, I think it is totally fair to make a correlation between cold attacks, the potential for them to be on the increase, and for higher amounts of moisture to be involved. All things to La Nina, I think that's perfectly fair to correlate from that about snowfall. That's my opinion. Not every meteorologist agrees, but I do. My opinion counts for me. All right, so I'm still going to go with below average to the north, a very typical La Nina look, to be honest. Last year, we were above normal in temperature for the winter. It may not have seemed like it, but we were. I think we will likely average out above normal, and certainly a good chunk of the southern United States. This one I'm not too thrilled to show because it is such a high, it just varies greatly in a winter season around here, so it's really tough to show. But you're going to see it probably in other outlooks, so at least want to show what I think our version of that. I hope that makes sense. All right. Now, because of La Nina, I do think, and this is also a challenge to you in predicting severe weather, obviously, but again, correlating an idea of strong energy that will come into play at times from the north, and we will have still some water to work, warm air from the waters here from the Gulf to work with. I think we'll end up with 2 periods really to watch for severe weather. Likely, this November is looking to be stormy, but also as we get into probably February. I'm not seeing it really for January, but February or into March may increase again. But this is fairly common to see severe weather outbreaks in the winter season. And I think Dixie Alley is a little more prone to this than Tornado Alley is. Tornado Alley is a little more common in El Nino, and La Nina, you tend to find it more east. So I've done this a few times on trying to highlight the storm potential, and I think it's fair to put it in generally that same spot. But Dixie Alley, especially a little closer to the Gulf, I-20, I-10, a little more prone to that than a little further to the north. But notice I didn't at least include us in the low potential on that. Okay. Is this the fun one next? All right, the next one's the snow one. All right, everyone relax. Here's the snow one. All right, so going to be very similar to what my thoughts were on La Nina. Last year, I didn't do very well with this map, I'll be blunt. I aimed it a little more into the plains and kind of grazed us with it. But we didn't have a strong enough signal to know which way we were going to go with La Nina last year, if it was going to be completely neutral or not. There were a lot of questions, so it was a lot more of a challenge. This year, the signal is a bit stronger for La Nina. How strong it gets absolutely will be a deciding factor on the outcome here. So ask me in March. I'll let you know how it turned out. But as of now, I think the potential to get winter storms, and this is, again, a more entertainment graphic out there. So I know meteorologists get all up in arms, other meteorologists on this, but don't panic. This is pure for fun, because I think it's fun to correlate that. I think there's ways to know this, all right? Technology is getting better. It really is. We're not 1980 anymore, all right? We can get an idea of areas more prone to winter storms than others. I know it seems like a given that the more north you are, the higher potential compared to the south. Yeah, of course. But what always seems to matter is our area. The Ohio Valley is the tough part. And that's where I think we will have, again, a higher signal. If I really wanted to, I would have removed this area a little more. But I think they may have an early start this year to the snow season before La Nina really grabs the country and we see a pattern flip just because of how much snow has already fallen in Montana. I think that's going to lead to a quick little burst, and then they may shut down for a good chunk of the winter season. It may not be as active, but it may be enough to get them a few under their belt. Meanwhile, for us, it's kind of the opposite. I think we're going to be a little delayed on getting some of our action in the Ohio Valley, but December, I think, is fair to start seeing that signal go up. So there you go. So here's our outlook. I'll leave this for a minute. I'm going to actually try to get some of your questions at this point, and before I show you a couple more things. I'm going to go with about 2.5 degrees above normal for the overall winter temperature. Last year was 3. I think we'll be a little colder than last year, just with the La Nina signal being a little stronger. Snowfall last year, 27.6 inches of snow. Most of that was early on, right, in January. January was a rough month. I think it'll be similar. Our average is roughly, I think it's 11.9. It always changes as we switch in a 30-year gaps. But anyway, it's roughly about 11 inches is our average. I think we'll be above that. And I know that snow lovers out there, like, I want all that at once, please. I want all 25 at one storm. And some of you, like, I would like 1.5 each day for the rest of the winter. Everyone's got their flavor on this one. I personally don't mind the smaller ones. I don't want them too light. The 1-inch snows, I think, are a problem because of the number of accidents that we have, especially in the Louisville Metro. It's significant because schools are still open. Everyone's still got to go to work. People slide and crash. 1-inch snows are a problem here. You get to a 3 to 4-inch snow, that's exciting. The blades of the grass in the yard get covered up. That's important right there. So make sure to get your grass cut down to where, I hate when the grass sticks through the snow. Anyway, that's a kid thing. I like when it's all covered. No one's allowed to walk in my front yard. Dolby always knows that and runs straight for it, so I let him out because Pop runs right through the middle of it. I like it very pristine. Anyway, I think a 3 to 4-inch snow is a good one because it's still manageable to get around. But there's enough caution, a greater amount of caution. Everyone seems to drive with a little more sense than they do with a 1-inch snow, and it's not big enough to where everyone's stuck and have to hibernate and run into problems because being isolated is not always a good thing, especially when it comes to medical needs or anything like that. So there are a lot of issues with bigger snows. Bigger snows at the right time, and when's the right time is a good question, but people love because that's what we think of in our childhood, whether you're a child of the 70s snowstorms or the 1994 snow or even the late 90s. We all have our memories of being snowed in and how cozy that was, but we were also kids. We didn't have the stress of being parents and knowing that there's a lot of stress that comes with that. It's a different world now. All right. A lot of people can work from home now than what we had then. So economically, it's not as much of an impact in today's world as it was before. But I'm not saying that we're going to get a huge one, all 25 at once. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to be evened out through the masses here. But I do know that potential for the amount of moisture doing the equivalent over to potential on snowfall in this kind of a pattern would argue for above normal. Nothing like 1970s, 77, 78. That winter was 50.1. That's still the king of top snowfalls. Okay, so what questions can I try to answer about this before I get into where we are looking at the outlook right now in the next 2 weeks? Let's see. Hey, how you doing, Sean? My mother was born in the middle of the big 70s snowstorm. We still have the articles somewhere in our family album from the Louisville Times, before it was the Journal, of a car being pushed on the outer loop in front of the Mount Vernon apartments there near Jefferson Mall on the outer loop. There's somebody pushing a car. And I remember that as a kid. That image was instilled in my head because I never had seen anything until the 1994 snowstorm. I'd never seen anything like that. So I would see that image in the paper. I would just stare at it. I'm like, wow, I wonder what that would have been like. Didn't take long to find out. I'm a big fan, too, that winters like that are cyclical. Tom Wills was a big fan of that. We had a lot of discussions about it, that about every 30 years, sometimes 40, but typically about every 30 years, those types of winters tend to repeat. And it makes sense when you look at the 70s into the 90s into where we have been in the 2010s, that we're kind of getting that same type of thought process. We'll see if the warming and the change in the ice in the Arctic is going to skew that time frame. Maybe it's going to make it a little more frequent. Instead of a 30-year cycle, maybe it's a little faster. I don't know. That's a very good question. And I hope there's a student out there that's in college now that would love to take that on to try to answer that, because I love climatology, but that's certainly a tough one to tackle, because there's no doubt that has been a big change we've had. Tina, it's about time for our type of winter like that. Yeah, it's probably about time for that. Albert, good question. What's the potential for ice? Well, La Nina winters are prone for more ice than that can be all snow, just because you've got the you can't get high amounts of moisture without warm air. And this is where it gets very frustrating for snow lovers, is the ones that want the big snow. I know you want the Arctic air because you love when you hear Arctic blast or polar vortex. For a snow lover, that's not always a good thing, because to me, that's screaming, it's going to be cold and dry. It's going to be cold and dry. We're going to miss out. It'll be a snowstorm in Atlanta, Georgia. You've got to have warm air to get those bigger snows, but only just enough. You get too much and it's rain or something else like ice. It's a careful balancing act. There's no way, obviously, to predict that now, but it's a balancing act. So it's always, this is why we always stress out in our area in forecasting, because we know what we're looking for and we know the questions you're going to ask, but it really is going to come down to the amounts of moisture that are just enough and just enough warmth to allow for big snows. I will say this, our biggest threat for ice storms around here is after an Arctic attack. When we get down to 0 or even sub-zero numbers, the real brutal stuff, wind chills 15, 20 below, everyone's freezing. The Ohio River's got steam everywhere, or even gets little pieces of ice in it. When you come out of those Arctic air masses, we are very much vulnerable for ice storms in our area. It's harder to get them on the front end of them. I don't see that as often. It's happened, but it's not very common here in our kind of weather patterns and climate that we have. We are more prone to them when we come out of an Arctic blast. And that's what I'm always looking for. So yeah, I hear all the boos and nays of everyone getting upset about the lack of snow and Arctic plunge, but I'm already looking ahead to see when do we come out of that and what storm system is riding down the pipe, because that one may show up as something other than what the reality will be. And my gut usually goes right into ice right away with it. So that's how you get your ice storms, or after Arctic attacks. Your snowstorms tend to be, again, that perfect blend of warm air and cold. You want to be as close to 32 as you can. Once you get too far below that, actually 30 to 32 is a really good temperature for the big, giant, heavy, wet snows in the Ohio Valley, the big ones. Once you get below 30 degrees, you're going to get into smaller flakes. You can still get big snows, but they gotta try a little harder to get to the accumulation level that you're thinking in your mind. And the flakes are not as pretty. It's more like just a bunch of dust blowing around is what it looks like outside. So once you get into a colder air mass, you don't get into as much of a pretty snow. And they don't stick to trees either. I like the ones that stick to the trees, not so much break them. I'm not saying that. I think it's pretty, though, like a postcard. That's where you get that 30 to 32. You want to be as close to that number as you can. In the 1994 storm, we were at 32 degrees. That's how we got the 15.9. And that one was a forecast, if you remember, originally was 7 inches of snow. Then it went to potential for an ice storm. Then it went to 1 inch or less, and then all rain. And then we ended up with 15.9. And that is where we didn't have good enough data to figure out those layers I showed you at the very beginning of the blog, the warm layer and cold layers. We didn't have enough data to know the thickness of all those. And the models were bouncing around. They were flipping on which type it was trying to focus on. And that has a completely different outcome, as you're fully aware. But that's how sensitive the atmosphere in the wintertime is. Very sensitive, where 1 degree does matter. 1 lonely degree. It's the only time of the year we battle something like that. But I think it's exciting personally as a snow lover. I think it's exciting. It's fun. It's what got me really into meteorology is the challenge of it. It doesn't always work out. But we've got better data now than we did certainly in the 1994 storm. So we're able to sniff those events out a lot faster than we were before. The problem I'm seeing now is that we're getting too much data. It's overwhelming, and you get all kinds of outcomes on social media at that point. That's where it gets a little dangerous. But anyway, Angie, you're right. When you get into colder temperatures, you get the fluffy snow. It's easier to use a broom. You don't have to shovel. Those are easier in that sense, yes. The wet snows are a little tougher. Any other questions before I move on? There's a lot of you here, so I'm trying to scan through, and I probably have missed a lot of your questions. So I apologize. Let's see. When does El Nino come back? Kelly asked. Sorry, Kelly, I skipped over your comment. There is a moderate signal for El Nino next year, as early as the summer, actually. So we may have an El Nino winter. We'll see. I think that, again, the change in the Arctic ice, I think is fascinating because I don't know if we're ever going to get to where the polar vortex, and the polar vortex is strong. If you ever say it's a strong polar vortex, that means it's locked up. It's at the North Pole. It's not going anywhere. If it's a weak polar vortex, I know it sounds odd to use the terminology in terms of cold weather, but if it's a weak polar vortex, that's good for us. That means snow's on the move. I think it's going to be harder to get strong polar vortices again to show up just because we're changing, not we personally, but it's not the same profile up north as it was. And I don't know if that will ever go back. I really don't. So there are significant questions about the future of winters in general. You know, we have global warming. Yes, we can see the rise in temperature, but what you don't realize is when you have that effect, you also can create the other extreme of very cold air masses. So you can have both, but they just get more extreme on either end. You don't get as much of the Goldilocks in the middle stuff. So it makes it tougher to predict for sure. Okay, so let me show you. There's that. I've been rambling too long about this one. Some things to look for to show that we're on track or off track. I want you to pay attention to these because this worked out last year, and I referenced it, I think, in near Christmas. These are the items that go for us to have a good snowy winter. A slow jet stream. When you have a slow jet stream, you have a blocking pattern. More likely, Arctic air will invade. You get bigger low pressures, stronger low pressures that move very slow. They can be large, encompassing a good chunk of the lower 48. And that's how you get your big snows. And you can also get your big storms too. But a slow jet stream really can buckle and you get more of the support of a winter storm. Getting Midwest snow, and I would really attach all three of those there. Midwest, Siberian snow, and into the deep snowpack. That is all a big player really on the idea that we're reducing friction is what is happening. When air masses are sliding out of Canada as they build up snow in the coming weeks, as already doing in Montana, and they're doing it in Canada now, cold air will glide right over it. Just glides right along until it hits the bare ground. And once that happens, friction takes over and the air mass starts warming up. You start seeing the numbers come up. So it could be 15 to 20 below zero in International Falls in Minnesota. But by the time it gets here, because the snowpack ends, say around Chicago, by the time the air mass gets here, it's a 30-degree, 35-degree day. It modifies. But if you have snow all over the Midwest and in the upper portions of the Ohio Valley, that gliding effect of the cold Arctic air mass, it never has a chance to modify or warm up. So there is nothing to stop it. It comes right into our backyard as 15 to 25 below zero. So those are the really brutal Arctic attacks, is when you have snow cover all in the path of its journey. And that's where I get into that Midwest snow, Siberian snow, just because that's its origin point in many cases. We call that cross-polar. I'm getting technical, but anyway, it's a factor in the list. And then your deep snowpack, and that's here. If we already have snow on the ground here and you're getting cold air masses, it's tough to get out of it, and you may just see things repeat. We did that in January. Once we got in the rut, it was hard to get out of the rut. we were getting them nonstop. Every week, every storm system had a snow component to it because we just were not losing the snow off the ground to allow for friction to take over and to modify things. We had to wait till they got spaced out just enough, and that's when we had a chance to melt some of the snow off. And once that happened, winter was basically done once that took place. And the last one's important. Warm Alaska. Alaska last year started off with a record amount of snowfall as they entered late fall. I'm not sure where Anchorage is now. I know they had some snow. They're kind of mixed right now. They've already had some snow, but I wouldn't say it's the level of last year, to be honest. But when you get into a warm Alaska and they're setting records in Anchorage or all the way into Fairbanks, anything like that being talked about, tends to favor a cold and snowy pattern for us. So those are all factors that we're going to be watching on the checklist. Things going against us, that something's off track and winter is done. It's a dud. Forecast is a bust. Sorry, folks. Try again next year. Is if we end up with a very fast jet stream, storm systems can't dig. They can't allow cold air to even drop south because they're moving it along too far to the east before it can go south. You have a snowless north. You're lacking that snowpack. So there's a lot of friction going on north of us. The polar vortex is strong, which again would mean trapped cold air at the pole. And you have a lot of thunderstorms. When you get into a very active setup with thunderstorms, especially as you get into January, it's not unusual to have them in November and December. I'm not ruling that out, and this year for sure. But January, when you get thunderstorms in January, that's usually a sign that winter is going to be tough. And of course, the inverse of Alaska. If Alaska is cold and setting records of snow and it's still January, then yeah, that's not good for us. We may end up with a warmer winter. So we're going to be monitoring this checklist together, and we'll just see how it evolves. I think the Christmas through New Year's window is a fair time to check this. Too early to do it before that. And after that, it'd be too late. But before or right around Christmas week, remind me. I'm sure I'll be thinking about it. We'll go through this and see where we stand. Fair? All right. So when is our guess for the first 1 inch of snow at Ollie International Airport? The snow contest ended yesterday. Thank you all for all your guesses. Tons of you responded. A lot of you with the same dates. I'm getting a little nervous. But anyway, we'll find out what happens. But this is our guess. And we've got a wide range this year for our team, which is interesting. Earliest is Ryan Hoke on the 5th of December. Then it's Carson. I chose Christmas Day because why not? I always think you should always choose Christmas. You always should choose for a white Christmas, right? Tawana is not far behind for January 2nd. And Kevin's always, well, not always. There's been a few years Kevin's gone December. But he usually is the latest. And he is this year, January 15th. Let's hope he's wrong. I don't want to wait that long. That's way too long. Although it is our average period of bigger snow is the second week in January. So he's on the right track of thinking on that. What'd you say, Carrie? January 3rd it is. All right. I hope everyone's got their guesses in. We'll find out what happens once we get into the first 1 inch of snow. Speaking of that, here's the snow matrix. Oh, where's Cameron? I didn't know if he's here or not. This is, if you're new to the blog, this is where we look at the ensembles coming in, any snow potential all the way through a week before Christmas. And what you're looking at are each line is a different models, or it's the same model, but different ideas of the same model of when the snow will begin. The different colors would mean amounts. Don't focus on that, please. Just look at where the lines start. And if there's a lot of clustering, there are a few that try to pick up a signal in mid-November. But you remember where you saw the polar vortex, right? So interesting. But the polar vortex only see through the 11th right now, as far as I could see. So it'll be interesting this week to see if this signal starts to show up. We'll be within range this upcoming week. Otherwise, it certainly fills in much more in December. And this is a pretty noisy look. And to be honest, it looks a lot like last year. We had snow on Thanksgiving last year. Not a lot, but it was measurable. We had snow, light snow events, and several days in December. December was cold until Christmas. Then we had 60 degrees on Christmas. But it mimics a lot of last year, to be honest. But it's the noises I've seen it so far. But you got to remember, and I've mentioned this before if you watched on the blog, is that anytime you see these show up, I would push it back roughly 10 days. And that seems to be a fair delay that these maps usually show for us. Kind of fun, though, to look at it. And I'll show you an updated look coming up on, well, actually, I didn't get a chance to tell you all this yet, but I will be out. I will be back on Thursday this week coming up, which is supposed to be the very first day of Snow Talk. And that is you saw the logo, there it is behind me. Snow Talk is the daily winter blog that I do. Even if there is no snow in the forecast, it will be the title of the blog every day. People still get angry at me over that, but I've been doing this for 15 years with Snow Talk. Actually, this is my 25th year doing Snow Talk at other places I've worked, but 15 here. But Snow Talk will be the title. The only time that would not be the case is if there's a threat for severe thunderstorms. And I'm mentioning that because when you look at the 10-day, I'm not so sure that I'm going to be able to do Snow Talk right at the gate on Thursday, because we are looking warmer next week and could even touch 70 for the middle of the week. And we could even push into the lower 70s at some point Friday or Saturday. There is a thunderstorm signal already showing up. I don't have much more info than that at the moment, but I do think it's worth watching. There are at least 2, maybe 3 systems, fairly potent low pressures that zip along through here that may make things active. So we'll see. I hope I can kick off Snow Talk on Thursday, but if you don't see that as the title, then that should be your first clue that we have something else that we got to take care of first. But we'll get to it, I promise. There you go. Type 5, if you are satisfied with the winter discussion this year. Type 5, if you're okay with it. Type 3 times 4 minus 6 divided by 8 to the first power if you're not happy with the winter outlook this year. You only have those 2 options, though. You can't go in the middle. Would you say, my gut is November, but I'm probably wrong? You never know. Again, we had a warm signal in November last year, and then suddenly you got toward Thanksgiving, and then we ended up with the snow on Thanksgiving. It was a light snow, but still pretty. Everyone seems happy. All right, come on. I need more 5s. I need more 5s. That's only like 6 of you so far. This is a lot of work. I do this just for you all. I don't do it for my own pleasure. I'm always doing a winter forecast in my head, but I do this for you all because I know you guys are the true bots fans out there. You want to know. You guys are smart enough to know that it could always change, and usually does, but it's always worth trying to get right. It's always fun to track as well if you're a true snow lover, and that's the reason why I like doing it. So if you guys weren't around, I wouldn't be doing it. There you go. Weather kick. Nobody said anything about math. Yep. Unfortunately, that's part of the career. That's part of the career. Let's see. Everyone looks good. All right. See, I forced y'all into 5s. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it was informative. And it's going to be an interesting winter. I feel like I say that every year, but this year I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to track. And this has been a very much a year of extremes already. And I think that's just the way the new norm is going to be. I don't think we're going to have a lot of normal weather. So that's okay in some sense, but nerve-wracking on the other side of the coin. There is rain coming in tonight. No severe weather tonight, but there is light rain on the way tonight. So it is going to be a rainy first night of November. Get outside. Don't go outside. Stay in. Watch leftover scary movies on the couch if you want to, and enjoy the night or just rewatch the blog, because when I'm done here, it will replay on Facebook if you want to watch it back again and listen to me ramble. Thank you all again. You're awesome. I love you guys. Behave yourselves. And I will see you guys coming up on Thursday, hopefully, with the first edition of Snow Talk.